In our previous journey, we walked the hidden corridors beneath the temples, where ancient priests encoded not just theology, but technology of the soul. We explored the silent vaults, the resonance chambers, the myths of Zep-Tepi and the whispers of the Shemsuhor, those who came before the pharaohs and vanished behind the veil of time. But the most dangerous secrets were never buried in stone. They were spoken, because the Egyptians believed that words could create reality. In the beginning, they said, the god Ta spoke the world into existence. The tongue was not just a symbol, it was a tool, a wand, a weapon. The written glyph was not mere language, it was alive. And if words could create, they could destroy. Tombs were never just places of rest. They were sealed rituals, protected by geometry, guarded by gods, but above all, bound by spells. Not poetic verses, not metaphor, but precise, living codes, engineered to guide, repel, or punish. These were not stories for the living. They were instructions for the dead, and warnings for anyone foolish enough to read them aloud. What happens when you break that seal? What happens when modern men, archaeologists, tourists, scholars, step where only priests once dared, and speak what was never meant to be repeated? This episode is not about architecture. It is not about treasure. It is about words. Words that shape dreams. Words that protect the silence of the grave. Words that still, after 3,000 years, may hold power no one fully understands. From the curse in Tutankhamun's tomb, to inscriptions designed to haunt your sleep, to whispers that trigger fire from sealed chambers, today, we explore the side of Egypt you were never meant to hear. These are the top 5 secrets of tombs and words Egypt tried to bury. But remember, not all knowledge was meant to be unearthed. And some stories may cling to the one who listens. 1. The spoken warning in Tutankhamun's tomb. Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the king's rest. It is the most famous tomb in history, and perhaps the most feared. When Howard Carter finally breached the sealed doorway of Tutankhamun's burial chamber in 1922, what he found shocked the world: golden chariots, immaculate statues, untouched sarcophagi, and the perfectly preserved face of a long-dead boy king. It was a discovery that changed archaeology forever. But from the moment Carter opened that door, something else entered the story. Something darker. Something whispered. The legend of the curse. Carter himself was skeptical. A man of science, not superstition. But others weren't so lucky, or so rational. Within months, Lord Carnarvon, the wealthy patron who funded the excavation, died unexpectedly from a mosquito bite that turned septic. On the night he died, a blackout swept across Cairo. At the very same hour, back in England, his dog howled and dropped dead. Then came the others. An American financier connected to the dig, dead. A radiologist who x-rayed the mummy, dead. A member of Carter's team, poisoned. A visitor who viewed the tomb, died in a mysterious accident. By 1930, over a dozen people associated with the tomb had died under strange circumstances. Newspapers fanned the flames. Stories of a pharaoh's curse spread across the globe. At the heart of it all was a single line, reportedly found inscribed on a clay tablet near the entrance. Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the king's rest. Some scholars have dismissed the phrase as a Victorian invention, perhaps crafted by Carter's team to keep looters away. But others disagree. In ancient Egypt, spoken words had magical force, what they called Heka. A phrase was not just descriptive. It was causal. To speak something was to bring it into being. This is why tomb walls are so full of words, not for reading, but for activation. And if the tomb itself was a spell, then that phrase was not a warning. It was a trigger. The Egyptians believed the soul had 5 parts. The Ka, life force, the Ba, personality, the Ren, name, the Ibi, heart, and the Shut, shadow. As long as a person's name was remembered, they lived. As long as the tomb was intact, their shadow was whole. To disturb that balance was to provoke retaliation from the unseen world. Some Egyptologists now believe that Tutankhamun's tomb may have been one of the most carefully warded burial sites ever constructed. His death was sudden. His burial rushed. But the inscriptions, though sparse, carry an urgency not found in other tombs. And the key lies in something easily overlooked: the placement of words. In traditional tombs, protective spells were often found around the chamber walls. But in Tutankhamun's, several were placed facing inward, toward the mummy itself, as if the boy king were protected not just from intruders, but from something trying to escape. Could it be that the curse was not aimed at grave robbers, but at whatever spiritual energy remained entombed with the pharaoh? In 1968, a re-examination of Tutankhamun's body revealed something strange: a severe skull fracture, and signs of burning. Some experts suggested that his body had been spontaneously scorched inside the sarcophagus. A chemical reaction? Perhaps. Or something else? Could the ancient Egyptians have encoded not just defense, but vengeance into the tomb, words designed to strike from beyond death? Carter never died mysteriously. He lived until 1939. But he never fully dismissed the strange atmosphere surrounding the tomb. He wrote in his journal, "The air inside felt alive, like a place that had been waiting." Waiting for what? A thief? A seeker? Or a speaker? Because in Egypt, words weren't just a threat. They were binding contracts between worlds. Break them, and you wake something meant to stay buried. 2. The protective spells hidden in paintings. Walk into an Egyptian tomb, and your eyes are immediately drawn to the color: the deep blues, sacred reds, shimmering golds. The figures seem to move. The gods watch you. The pharaohs march through the afterlife, guided by jackal-headed protectors and solar boats, riding the night sky. But what if these weren't just murals? What if they were machines? To the ancient Egyptians, tomb paintings weren't decoration. They were living texts, sacred inscriptions fused with image, symbol, and sound. And above all, they were defensive systems. These weren't static illustrations. They were spells, carefully designed to activate under certain conditions: visual, spoken, or even spiritual. Let's start with the most well-known, the Book of the Dead. Despite its ominous name, the Book of the Dead was actually a manual for the soul, a collection of utterances meant to guide the deceased through the afterlife. In tombs, these spells were often painted across walls, pillars, and ceilings. But here's the twist: many of these spells had dual functions. Yes, they were meant to help the soul of the dead, but they were also meant to defend the body. Some of the most powerful inscriptions are what modern scholars call apotropaic spells, texts designed to repel harm. They called on gods like Sekhmet and Serket to unleash fury on any who dared disturb the tomb. Others were far more subtle. There were spells hidden inside color. The pigment used for protective spells was not chosen for aesthetics alone. For example, Egyptian blue, made from copper and sand, was considered a spiritual frequency, said to vibrate at a level that soothed the Ka, life force. Red ochre was a warning signal, used for boundaries, chaos, and danger. Gold leaf was more than luxury. It represented divine flesh, especially that of the sun god Uri. Its use near entrances wasn't symbolic, it was ritual armor. The layout of spells was equally intentional. In many tombs, the protective inscriptions are arranged not to be read, but to block movement. Scholars have discovered that in certain chambers, the hieroglyphs were written in reverse orientation, or even mirrored layouts. These are called trap texts, designed to confuse or disorient spiritual intruders. Imagine entering a dark tomb. Your torch flickers. You see writing on the wall, but it reads backwards. It doesn't make sense. You read it anyway. What if that was the point? Some Egyptologists now believe these disorienting spells were verbal snares, meant to bind a spirit, or person, in a loop of confusion, spiritual static, or even madness. There are also threshold spells, placed above or around doorways. They often contain phrases like, "None shall pass who carries impurity. Let the unjust be struck blind." These weren't just poetic flourishes. They were verbal codes that had to be spiritually answered by the passing soul, or intruder. To walk through the doorway was to trigger a test. Even more mysterious are shadow glyphs, symbols painted not in color, but with resin or charcoal so faint that they can only be seen under certain angles of light. These ghostly glyphs often contain personal names of divine guardians, suggesting a private, secondary layer of magical defense. And then there are the missing spells. In several tombs, there are sections of wall that are perfectly framed, but left blank. No hieroglyphs, no images. Why? Some believe they were intended to be loaded with spoken spells by the tomb priest after burial, like spiritual hard drives. Others believe these were deliberate voids, designed to trap disembodied entities in a space with no exit, like a magical dead zone. This theory gained traction in 2010 when an expedition discovered a series of connected tombs beneath Abydos. The central chamber was covered with vivid spells, but one side wall was blank, and when explored by a team of trained spiritual practitioners, several reported nausea, dizziness, and waking visions. Is it superstition? Or is it ancient science? Because to the Egyptians words were tools, and when fused with paint, image, and space, they became architecture of defense. So the next time you look at a painting of Anubis standing guard, or a strange figure holding an inverted staff, or a line of text that vanishes in the corner, ask yourself, what was it meant to do? And what happens if it's doing it to you? 3. Combustion traps in the sealed chambers. We often think of ancient tombs as silent, still, and inert. But in the deepest, most protected chambers of Egypt, some tombs weren't designed to keep things out. They were designed to burn them. Welcome to one of the strangest and most controversial theories in Egyptology: the combustion trap. Let's begin with a mystery. In 1968, a team of researchers re-examining Tutankhamun's remains noticed something disturbing. Parts of the mummy's skin were charred black. His wrappings had been scorched. Internal tissues were abnormally brittle, suggesting exposure to intense heat after burial. For decades, this was brushed off as a mistake in embalming or modern mishandling. But one theory emerged, quietly at first, among those who study tomb architecture. What if it wasn't a mistake? What if it was deliberate? Several tombs in the Valley of the Kings and Saqqara contain narrow chambers sealed with bitumen, resins, and volatile oils, all highly flammable. In a contained space, even a small flame or chemical spark could lead to a violent reaction. But here's where it gets more intriguing. Some researchers suggest that sound, specifically the chanting of sacred phrases, may have played a role in triggering combustion. This is not fantasy. In modern physics, resonant frequency is the idea that materials can vibrate, and sometimes break, when exposed to specific sound waves. Think of a wine glass shattering from a single musical note. Now imagine a sealed tomb, its walls coated with flammable substances, its geometry engineered to amplify sound. A team enters. A priest chants the wrong phrase. The frequencies build. Heat rises. And then, ignition. Could this be why some tombs include silent zones? Spaces with no inscriptions, no paint, nothing to reflect sound? These zones might not have been decorative omissions. They might have been acoustic buffers, absorbing dangerous frequencies. This ties into a broader concept in Egyptian funerary science, the idea of sound as energy. Chanting wasn't merely devotional. It was ritual technology. It was believed that words, properly intoned, could alter the temperature, mood, or even molecular vibration of a space. In a sense, the tomb became a kind of spiritual pressure chamber, and it had to be kept sealed. The act of opening these chambers, especially without the proper ceremonial words and timing, may have destabilized the balance and triggered combustion. There's precedent for this. In 2001, during a controlled excavation at Dashur, a sealed chamber was opened for the first time in 4,000 years. Within minutes, a small chemical fire ignited near the sarcophagus. No ignition source was found. The air had been stale, heavy with ancient dust and chemical residues. The official explanation? Unstable embalming materials. But the lead researcher reportedly whispered to a colleague, "The tomb didn't want us here." This isn't to say that ancient Egyptians used explosives. They didn't need to. They used silence, stillness, time, and then, when the balance was broken, fire. There are tomb inscriptions that seem to hint at this. "Let the breathless flame rise to greet the unworthy. Only the pure may pass through smoke and shadow. He who speaks without name shall burn in the airless dark." Some of these phrases have been dismissed as metaphor. But what if they're not? What if the breathless flame wasn't spiritual at all, but literal? To the priests of Egypt, protecting the soul was everything. And to protect it, they turned the tomb into a ritual machine, a place where elements, geometry, and Heka, magical speech, work together. Enter at the wrong time. Speak the wrong name. And the trap doesn't fall. It ignites. 4. The dream-disturbing curse of the tombs. Some tombs kill quickly. Others take their time. In ancient Egypt, death was not the end. The soul passed through a treacherous underworld, guided by spells, protected by amulets, and weighed against the feather of Ma'at. But what if the protection wasn't only for the dead? What if it extended into the minds of the living? One of the strangest patterns noticed among modern excavators, tomb workers, and even tourists is not death, but nightmares. Take the tomb of Nefermat, located at Midam. Carved during the Old Kingdom and celebrated for its vivid false door and painted reliefs, the tomb also includes a lesser-known inscription, short, almost cryptic. "Let the restless find no peace. May sleep twist and churn for those who break the seal." At first glance, it reads like poetic nonsense. But beginning in the 1980s, researchers cataloging the tomb's interior began reporting bizarre experiences. Chronic insomnia during the dig. Waking at 4 a.m. every night with racing heartbeats. Nightmares of being buried alive, or watched from within walls. Recurrent visions of jackal-headed figures whispering in foreign tongues. One field worker claimed he dreamed of chanting the same sentence repeatedly each night, until he was physically ill. Another began seeing inverted hieroglyphs in his dreams, later recognizing them on a fragment he hadn't seen yet. Coincidence? Psychosomatic stress? Possibly. But similar stories emerged from other tombs. In 1997, a team working near the tomb of Thutmose III found a hidden passage carved into the rock. Inside was a niche with only one item, a black stone tablet inscribed with the following phrase: "He who reads this shall carry the voice into his sleep." The tablet was removed and placed in a Cairo archive. 3 of the men who handled it later reported vivid audio hallucinations while sleeping, sounds of footsteps, wind, and distorted prayers. Again, no one died. But none of them rested. Egyptologists have long studied the power of Heka, not just as speech, but as vibration. Spoken spells, it was believed, could enter the shadow body, shut, of a person and disrupt its balance, even during dreams. What's more, the ancient Egyptians believed that names spoken in dreams held real power. If a person called out the name of a deity, or demon, while dreaming, they opened a brief, unstable doorway. This concept was used as both blessing and punishment. In some tombs, the Book of the Night is painted on ceilings, showing the sky goddess Nut swallowing the sun and giving birth to it each dawn. But hidden within these star maps are phrases of inversion. He who forgets his own name shall wander the darkness. May sleep twist with the mouths of the undone. Let dreams return without memory. These phrases were not included in funerary texts meant for the deceased, but instead placed near entrances and walls facing outward. Scholars now suspect they weren't for the dead. They were for you. Imagine this, a tomb designed not to kill trespassers, but to infect their sleep. To disturb the IB, heart, to scramble the Ren, name, and to fracture the Ba, personality, slowly, night after night. Not a quick death, but a slow unraveling. The kind that makes you forget who you are. The kind that leaves you afraid to close your eyes. The kind that plants something inside your dreams, and waits. Some Egyptian priests were known to whisper spells at night into the ears of statues and mummies, believing that sound could sink into stone, and release only when heard again. Could certain tombs contain dream triggers? Words that don't activate until spoken, or even imagined, while you sleep? In 2012, a private collector in London reportedly bought a painted fragment from an unregistered tomb. Within weeks, he began experiencing recurring dreams of drowning inside a sealed chamber. He eventually returned the piece, claiming that something inside it spoke at night. He wouldn't elaborate. All we know is this. Some tombs were sealed with stone. Others were sealed with silence. But some were sealed with sound, waiting to echo inside the one place no one else can follow you. Your dreams. 5. The mysterious wounds found in ancient tombs. The desert preserves everything. Bones, papyrus, paintings, even fingerprints in wet clay. But sometimes, what it preserves makes no sense. Among the strangest mysteries in Egyptian archaeology is the sudden appearance of wounds, both on ancient corpses and the tombs themselves, wounds that don't belong there. Let's begin with a simple question. How does a sealed, untouched burial chamber bleed? In 1986, a team exploring a lesser-known tomb in the necropolis of Dra Abu al-Naga uncovered a pristine sarcophagus, sealed, painted, and perfectly intact. The chamber had not been disturbed since the 18th dynasty. But when opened, they found something bizarre. The mummy's left side had a deep, jagged cut running from the ribcage to the hip. There was no stitching, no resin treatment, no amulets placed to heal or protect. The wound was not part of the embalming process. Even stranger, the coffin interior showed no signs of disturbance, and the wrappings around the wound were sealed cleanly, as if the injury occurred after burial, yet somehow, before. The lead archaeologist called it a violation without a cause. This isn't an isolated case. Multiple mummies, high and low status alike, have shown similar mysterious injuries. Slashes across the chest or abdomen, fractures of the skull with no sign of external trauma, burn marks on the back or hands, punctures with no tool marks or bone damage. Some blamed rodents. others decay. But the nature of these marks tells a different story. They appear deliberate, surgical, and, most unsettling, fresh. It's not just the bodies. Some tombs show strange gashes in stone, often near curse inscriptions. In a tomb near Elminia, a warning spell etched above a doorway reads, "He who enters with impure blood shall be marked." Directly beneath the phrase is a deep claw-like gouge in the wall, as if something tried to tear its way out. Researchers initially thought it was chiseled damage, until they realized the stone type in that location is harder than iron. No known tool in the region's history could have made that mark. A popular fringe theory suggests that these wounds are the physical result of spiritual backlash, that the tombs were designed to defend themselves, not with blades or traps, but by marking those who entered without permission. In other words, you don't just break into the tomb breaks into you. Let's look at a modern example. In 2005, a French documentary team entered the tomb of an brother of Queen Tai. One crew member tripped over a corner statue, cracking its base. Within hours, he complained of a burning sensation across his back. What they later found was a three-pronged scar, resembling the triple scepters carved onto the statue itself. He hadn't touched the carving. He didn't fall on it. But the mark remained. He left the project. Never returned to Egypt. Skeptics call it psychosomatic, the mind projecting trauma onto the body. But the Egyptians believed in the name, Ren, and that names carved onto stone could touch, bind, and even injure if disturbed. Some glyphs were designed not to be read. Some wounds were designed to be warnings. At Abydos, the so-called Chamber of Eyes includes wall art showing gods striking intruders, not with weapons, but with gaze. A single line reads, "Let the unworthy be seen and scarred." In ancient Egypt, to be seen by the divine was not always a blessing. It could be a sentence. A scar left not on the skin, but through it. What if the tombs themselves still look back? What if these chambers don't wait to be opened, but instead choose when to respond? What if a mark appears, not because of what you touched, but because of what saw you? We entered seeking knowledge. We left carrying echoes. Through 5 ancient truths, we've learned that Egyptian tombs are not just crypts. They are living structures, coded with language, sound, energy, and memory. A curse that whispers death. A glyph that turns walls into guardians. A vibration that burns without fire. A dream that refuses to leave you. A wound that no tool could make, but appears all the same. What if tombs don't just preserve the dead, but respond to the living? Every word carved into stone was a choice. A vibration. A spell. The ancients didn't write to be remembered. They wrote to control what comes next. And as we keep opening chambers, translating phrases, and publishing images across the internet, we must ask, are we still observers? Or have we become part of the ritual? Because some secrets were designed to be spoken only once. Some warnings weren't meant to be decoded. And some tombs were sealed not to trap the dead, but to contain something else. What happens when that seal breaks? In the next series, we go deeper, not into death, but into the rituals that surrounded it, the resurrection rites, forbidden symbols, and artifacts that were never meant to be removed. Because Egypt didn't just bury its kings, it buried instructions. And we may have already started reading them aloud.